My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 29 years old, and I had been planning my proposal for nearly a year. Not just any proposal, the proposal. The one that Sarah, my girlfriend of 5 years, would remember for the rest of her life. I had the location, the timing, the music, and most importantly, the perfect engagement ring. I had spent 3 months choosing it, visiting countless jewelers, comparing every detail from the cut of the diamond to the engraving inside the band. Forever yours, D. That wasn't just metal and stone. It was a symbol of everything we'd been through. The struggles, the late-night talks, the quiet moments when I knew she was the one. The plan was flawless. We would spend the day at the botanical gardens where we'd had our very first date. At sunset, under the archway covered in blooming wisteria, I would kneel, present the ring, and ask the question that had been burning in my chest for years. I could already picture her gasp, her hands over her mouth, and that tearful smile as she said yes. Everything was going smoothly that morning. My suit was perfectly pressed. The photographer, secretly hired to capture the moment, was in position, and Sarah had no idea what was coming. But there was one variable I hadn't accounted for: my brother, Ethan. Ethan was 2 years younger than me, charming, spontaneous, and reckless to a fault. Growing up, we were close, but as adults, our relationship had shifted. He had a way of making everything about himself, intentionally or not. And over the years, I'd learned that trusting him completely was a gamble. Still, I believed there were certain lines even he wouldn't cross. That belief shattered in a way I could never have imagined. It started small. He showed up at my apartment that morning, uninvited, wearing a smug smile. "Big day, huh?" he said, eyeing my suit. "Yeah," I replied cautiously. "I'm kind of in the middle of getting ready, Ethan." He waved a dismissive hand. "Relax, I just wanted to wish you luck. You know, maybe give you some brotherly advice." I didn't have time for his antics, so I thanked him quickly and went to check my jacket pocket, the pocket where the ring had been safely tucked away all week. I patted it absent-mindedly and froze. Empty. A strange chill crept down my spine. I checked the other pocket. The dresser, the nightstand. Nothing. My stomach twisted. I knew I had placed the ring there last night. I had even double-checked before going to bed. "Ethan," I said slowly, my voice low but sharp. "Did you touch anything in my room?" He raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. Why would I do that? The look in his eyes told me he knew exactly why. Before I could press further, he glanced at his phone, grinned, and said, "Well, I've got to run. Big plans today." And just like that, he walked out. I wanted to chase him, demand answers, tear apart his apartment if I had to. But the clock was ticking. Sarah was expecting me at the gardens in less than an hour, and the photographer was already waiting. Panic clawed at my chest. Without the ring, the proposal I had planned so perfectly would be meaningless. I tried calling him. No answer. Texts went unread. My mind spun through every possibility. Maybe he was just messing with me. Maybe he'd give it back at the last second. Maybe this was some twisted joke. But deep down, a darker suspicion was growing. Half an hour later, my phone buzzed. It was a message from a mutual friend. The photo attached made my blood run cold. There was Ethan, kneeling on one knee, holding my ring in front of his girlfriend, Emma. The caption read, "She said yes. Congratulations, Ethan and Emma." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled, my vision blurred with rage and disbelief. He hadn't just stolen a piece of jewelry. He had stolen my moment, my story, my future memory with Sarah. And he had done it first, publicly. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd ever felt. This wasn't just about a ring. This was my own brother turning what should have been the happiest day of my life into a humiliation for the world, or at least our entire circle of friends and family, to see. But the worst part? I still had to meet Sarah at the gardens. She had no idea any of this had happened. I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white as I drove. My mind was split between devastation and an icy resolve forming in my chest. I didn't know how I was going to face her or what I was going to say, but one thing became painfully clear in that moment. This wasn't over. Ethan might have stolen my ring and my proposal, but he had no idea what kind of storm he had just unleashed. By the time I reached the botanical gardens, the sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the flowers. It was the perfect light for the proposal I had planned. The proposal that would never happen. I spotted Sarah near the entrance, her smile lighting up the entire scene. She looked breathtaking in a light blue dress that danced with the breeze, her hair pinned back just the way I loved it. For a moment, I considered pretending everything was fine, smiling, laughing, and hiding the chaos that had erupted inside me. But then I remembered Ethan's smug face in that photo, my ring glinting in the sunlight as Emma clutched her hands to her chest. My chest tightened. "Hey," Sarah said, stepping forward to kiss me on the cheek. "You okay? You look tense." I forced a smile. "Just a hectic morning." We started walking toward the gardens. My mind was in overdrive, trying to think of a way to salvage the evening without revealing the truth. The last thing I wanted was for Sarah to think I was unprepared, or worse, that I didn't care enough to make this day perfect. The problem was, the photographer was already tailing us discreetly, waiting for the moment. I could feel his presence like a shadow at the edge of my vision. Every step we took toward the archway felt like a countdown to disaster. We reached the spot, the exact place where I'd planned to kneel, take out the ring, and ask her to be my wife. But instead, I stood there empty-handed, my heart pounding. "So, what's special about this place?" Sarah asked, glancing around with curiosity. My throat went dry. "This is where we first came together. Remember? 5 years ago, we sat right there under the wisteria and talked until they kicked us out." Her face softened at the memory, but I could see the question forming in her eyes. Why bring me here today? I opened my mouth, ready to spin some kind of excuse when my phone buzzed. Against my better judgment, I glanced at it. Another photo. This time, Ethan and Emma surrounded by a group of our mutual friends, all holding champagne glasses, celebrating. The caption from one friend read, "Best proposal ever. Congrats, you guys." It was like someone had poured acid down my throat. My hands clenched at my sides. The urge to tell Sarah everything, to let my fury spill out right there under the flowers, was overwhelming. But something in me shifted. If I told her now, I'd be reacting in anger. I'd look like the jealous, bitter brother who couldn't handle someone else's happiness. No. I needed to play this smart. If Ethan thought he'd humiliated me in front of everyone, then I'd make sure the world saw a side of him he couldn't hide from. I took a deep breath, smiled at Sarah, and said, "You know what? Let's just enjoy the evening. No plans, no expectations, just us." She seemed pleasantly surprised, though a little confused. We spent the next hour wandering the gardens, taking photos, laughing lightly. But inside, my thoughts were ice cold and calculated. When I dropped Sarah off at her apartment that night, she kissed me and said, "Today was different, but nice." I managed to smile and wave goodbye before my expression hardened. The second I got back to my place, I pulled up Ethan's Instagram. His feed was now flooded with proposal pictures, tagged with dozens of mutual friends, racking up likes and comments. "You're such a romantic, Ethan. Emma's so lucky. Can't wait for the wedding." My teeth ground together. Not one person knew the truth, that the ring on Emma's finger was meant for someone else, that the man they were congratulating had committed the kind of betrayal that would split most families forever. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my desk, staring at my laptop screen, mapping out my next moves. The hurt was still raw, but underneath it was a growing sense of precision. Ethan had made a public move, and I was going to respond in kind. The key was timing. I couldn't just storm into his celebration and make accusations. That would give him the upper hand. No, I had to dismantle him piece by piece, and it had to be so clean, so undeniable that even Emma would have no choice but to see the truth. I started with small steps, gathering old text messages, emails, and screenshots. Ethan had never been careful with his secrets. I remembered drunken confessions, flirty messages he'd sent to women who weren't Emma, even a few shady financial deals he'd bragged about. As I dug deeper, I stumbled on something bigger, something that made my pulse race. A string of messages between Ethan and one of Emma's closest friends. The tone was far from platonic. And the dates? They overlapped with the early months of his relationship with Emma. I sat back in my chair, a slow, grim smile spreading across my face. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was justice. The next morning, I called Ethan. He picked up on the third ring, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "Morning, big bro. Saw the photos? Pretty great, huh?" "I saw them," I said evenly. "We need to talk." "About what?" He laughed. "You're not still mad about—" I cut him off. "Face to face. Tonight. My place." There was a pause. "Sure, if you think you can handle it." When the call ended, I leaned back and let out a slow breath. Tonight would be the first move in a game he didn't even know he was playing. That evening, I made sure everything in my apartment was deliberate. The lighting was dim, but not too dark. 2 glasses of whiskey sat on the coffee table, a silent reminder of the last time Ethan and I had shared a drink, back when I still thought he was my brother in every sense of the word. When the knock came, I didn't rush to the door. I let him wait a few seconds before I opened it. Ethan strolled in like he owned the place, that same cocky grin plastered across his face. "Nice place," he said, glancing around. "Looks the same as always. You should really redecorate." I didn't bite. Instead, I motioned to the couch. "Sit." He dropped into the cushions and picked up one of the glasses. "So, what's this about? You jealous? Want me to give you tips on how to actually seal the deal with Sarah?" The sheer arrogance made my stomach turn. I sat across from him and locked eyes. "You know exactly why you're here." Ethan took a slow sip of his drink, then smirked. "Look, I get it. You were gonna propose to Emma, but you never told her. You never even hinted. And guess what? I did. I took a chance and she said yes. That's life, brother. Survival of the fittest." I leaned forward, my voice low. "That ring on her finger? That was our grandmother's ring, the one Mom gave me." For just a second, his smirk faltered. "Yeah, well, you weren't using it. You stole it." He shrugged. "Borrowed, permanently." I stared at him, letting the silence grow heavy. Then I slid my phone across the table. On the screen was a screenshot of the messages between him and Emma's friend. His eyes flicked down, then back up at me, trying to mask the flicker of panic. "Where did you get that?" "You were never careful," I said. "You leave trails, and now I have them." He laughed, but it was forced this time. "So what? You're gonna run to Emma and tell her? You think she'll believe you over me?" I leaned back, my voice calm. "No, I'm not going to tell her. I'm going to let her find out. And when she does, she'll know you've been lying since day one. But I'm not stopping there." Ethan's smile was gone now. He set the glass down, his jaw tightening. "You think you can ruin me?" "I don't think," I said. "I know." For the first time all night, he was silent. I could see the calculation in his eyes, the slow realization that I wasn't bluffing. But Ethan was nothing if not arrogant. He stood, straightened his jacket, and smirked again, though it didn't reach his eyes this time. "You're playing a dangerous game, Daniel," he said, "and you're gonna lose." "Maybe," I replied, "but you're going to bleed first." He left without another word. The next few days, I began laying the groundwork. First, I reached out to a mutual friend who worked in event planning, the same one Ethan had booked for his upcoming engagement party. Casually, I mentioned that I had some interesting news that might affect the guest list. Word travels fast in our circle, and I knew it wouldn't take long before whispers started. At the same time, I started planting seeds online. A harmless-looking anonymous account, a couple of vague posts about someone in our city proposing while cheating, and a few strategically timed likes on certain comments. The trick was to create doubt without naming names. Yet. Meanwhile, I kept seeing Sarah. I didn't tell her the full truth, but she knew something was going on. "You've been different," she said one night as we walked back from dinner. "Like you're carrying a secret." I forced a smile. "Just work stress." She didn't press, but I could tell she didn't believe me. That was fine. The less she knew for now, the better. A week later, Ethan's engagement party finally rolled around. It was being held at an upscale rooftop venue, all string lights and champagne fountains, the kind of place designed for Instagram perfection. I hadn't planned on going, but the opportunity was too good to pass up. When I arrived, people were already mingling, snapping photos, congratulating Ethan and Emma. She looked radiant in a white cocktail dress, the ring glittering on her hand. Ethan looked like the king of the world. He saw me across the room, smirked, and raised his glass in a mocking toast. That's when I made my move. I waited until a small crowd had gathered near the bar, then stepped up beside Emma. "Hey," I said warmly. "Can I steal you for a second? I've got something you should see." She looked curious, but followed me to a quieter corner. I handed her my phone, opened to the messages between Ethan and her friend. Her smile faltered instantly. "What is this?" she whispered. "Proof," I said quietly. "From before you two even got serious. I didn't want to show you, but you deserve to know who you're marrying." Her hands trembled as she scrolled. "This can't be real." "It's real," I said, "and it's not the only thing I have." She looked at me, her eyes wide, her breathing shallow. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because tonight is supposed to be about truth," I said, "and you should walk into your future with open eyes." She didn't say another word. She just turned and walked back into the crowd, her expression unreadable. 5 minutes later, I saw her confronting Ethan near the champagne table. His confident grin was gone, replaced with a tight defensive expression. People were watching. Phones were out. The perfect, untouchable image he'd built was starting to crack, exactly as I'd planned. And this was only the beginning. I walked into the conference room with the calm of a chess player who'd already mapped every possible move. My pulse was steady, my mind razor sharp. This was the day I'd waited for. The day my brother's carefully woven lies would unravel right in front of the people he needed most. The room was filled with executives, investors, and reporters. The press had been tipped off, though they didn't know by whom, and their cameras were ready to capture every flicker of emotion. My brother sat at the head of the table, smug as ever, his arm draped possessively around his fiancée, the woman who should have been mine. He thought this was just a regular quarterly announcement. He had no idea I was about to torch his world. I stood, my hand gripping a sleek black folder. "Before we proceed with the agenda," I began, my voice clear but cold, "there's something that needs to be addressed. Publicly." Every head turned toward me. I could see my brother's brow crease in irritation. "This isn't the time, Daniel," he muttered under his breath, but I pressed on. "2 months ago," I said, projecting my voice to the back of the room, "a theft occurred. A theft of something deeply personal. An engagement ring intended for someone special. It disappeared hours before I could propose. What I didn't know then, but do now, is that the thief was sitting in this very room." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My brother's fiancée stiffened, her eyes darting between us. He forced a laugh, the kind people use when they're cornered and desperate. "Are you seriously doing this?" I clicked the remote in my hand, and the projector lit up the wall with grainy security footage. It showed him, clear as daylight, unlocking my apartment with a spare key, heading straight to my desk drawer and pocketing the small velvet box. The next clip? Him kneeling before her in a crowded restaurant holding my ring. The room exploded in whispers. Investors shifted uncomfortably. Reporters scribbled furiously. His fiance's hand flew to her mouth, eyes wide with betrayal. I wasn't going to say anything, I continued, until I discovered that this wasn't the first time. Another click. A new set of images filled the screen. Old documents, emails, transaction records. They painted a picture of years of deception. Deals sabotaged, opportunities stolen, contacts poached. It wasn't just about the ring. He had been systematically dismantling my life for over a decade, all while pretending to be my biggest supporter. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. This is nonsense. Fabricated. You're jealous, always have been. Really? I cut in. Because here's an interesting fact. The company you're about to pitch to investors, it isn't yours. The patents you filed last month, they're registered in my name. The trademark? Mine. And the launch you've been hyping? Well, let's just say there's a cease and desist order waiting in your inbox. The room fell silent except for the quiet click of cameras. His face turned the color of wet concrete. But then, just when I thought I'd landed the killing blow, she spoke. His fiancée rose slowly, her gaze fixed on me. Daniel, I think you should know something. That night at the restaurant, when he proposed, I already knew. The air seemed to thicken. Knew what? I asked. That the ring wasn't his. That it was yours. And I said yes, not to him, but to the opportunity. She turned toward my brother, her voice now sharp as glass. I knew what you were doing, Liam, and I was playing along, because I wanted all of this. She gestured to the boardroom, the cameras, the chaos. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just betrayal. It was collusion. She looked back at me, her expression unreadable. You're smart, Daniel. Smarter than him. Maybe smart enough to realize we could work together. A murmur swept the room. My brother looked like he'd been punched. And for a moment, just a moment, I considered it. Joining forces with the woman who had destroyed my engagement day, who had helped ruin my relationship with my own blood, but who also had the cunning and ambition to pull it off. I closed the folder slowly. You two deserve each other, I said finally, my voice like ice. And I deserve better. Then I walked out, leaving the cameras, the chaos, and the smell of burning bridges behind me. But as the doors closed, I heard her voice one last time, soft, almost amused. Don't be so sure, Daniel. You haven't heard the last of me. I didn't know then whether it was a threat or a promise, but I knew one thing. The game wasn't over. Not by a long shot.